the lunch break of day 42 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We've been hearing more from Eric Docker, the Undercover Policing Manager. We start off the session with just looking at some minutes of a meeting where HN109 talks about the horizontal politics of the unit in gaining intelligence, and like a standing joke about that, and also a standing joke about how unattractive Helen Steele was. Docker accepted this was deeply hurtful to Helen, but he claimed to have no memory of it at all. This is quite indicative of his dismissive attitude generally around anything of that sort of thing. He claimed not to remember any of it. Then we got on to the undercover police officer, Stefan Scutt. Now, you may remember that there's an episode of the Spycops Info podcast with Donal Driscoll from the Undercover Research Group about Stefan Scutt. So I had to get Donal on this one because it's quite a wild ride on Stefan, right?
Oh, yes. Stefan was in the SWP. Yep. He's contemporary Lambert and Dine, so that's the area he's in. And it's basically a roller coaster of a ride. He goes in, he's apparently this great officer, he's got access to all these lists of names and stuff, and slowly this all starts disintegrating. Now there's a whole lot of other stuff going on behind Stefan Scutt, which see the episode about, because I can't summarize the craziness of this. Basically, he's a white boy. Yeah, he's a con man. He likes hanging out with dodgy property dealers and drives a Porsche and all that sort of stuff. To give you a picture of the man. But what we were hearing today was the other side of the story to a large degree, what the managers discovered, how they felt, how they learned about things, in the slow process of them starting to scratch their head and go, we're idiots here, but even us idiots can see there's something deeply wrong with his deployment. Given how much else they utterly failed to see. Like, these are the people saying, we didn't see anything about Lambert, we didn't see anything about Dines, they're all great officers as far as we could see. In fact, he was actually saying that, he wouldn't challenge them. He simply called a shot, and he said, well, they wouldn't have told me if I'd asked them. And so I think this is a really interesting point. So they start recognizing something is wrong with Scott. That his intelligence is really declining. They're asking about where his address is and where his car is. And he lives in Norfolk. He won't give them his car details. I go, well, this is not quite right. And they start, okay, you also need to do some work. You need to put in some reports on, which he doesn't do, so he's constantly being evasive. Yeah. So here you have a situation where they're going, oh no, if you'd asked them, they wouldn't tell them. But no, you're asking now, and they're being evasive. What are you doing as managers? You're not really managing. It's just kind of, they wouldn't tell us, but you're the managers. It's your responsibility to say, you're doing the job, you're in the police. And I'm like, I guess I don't really care about over this stuff. But you're deliberately in an organisation where you accept orders. So if they ask you for details, you're meant to give it, and they're just being brushed off, and the managers are letting it happen. And then, we start seeing the story unfold, and they're going like, no, we don't really think this is worth it. There's something wrong here. They start challenging him, and Stefan Scutt doesn't react very well at all.
I mean, he really doesn't. It's... We see the sort of the appraisals. Now, we've seen a lot of appraisals of Stefan Scutt earlier on, and they've been glowing. We've seen stuff from this bar. Well, this is it. Yeah, the bar. There's one about his time in Heathrow where he says he's a lazy git. But everything else is that he's like, he's exemplary in terms of the information he's getting. He requires very little supervision, and this is kind of the fact that he needs very little supervision is kind of presented as being like a good thing. It's like, he's very self-motivated, and it's only really when we have that second appraisal, which is written by HN109, who we'll be hearing from tomorrow, so that should be interesting, where that changes.
With Docker's approval, I think one of the things that's come out is this isn't just 109 going off on their own personal thing, which is what Lambert and others are trying to say, and Scott's also trying to say. 109 goes to Docker and says, I'm not happy, and Docker agrees with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then 109 pulls out the pen portrait, or as it's called, the essay that officers would expect, the potential recruits to the police were expected to submit as part of joining the police. And he pulls it out. And now everybody knows within the SDS and within Special Branch generally that Stefan Scott was ex-SAS. That he'd been a lieutenant in the SAS. And Docker says that he worked with him on the right-wing desk in C Squad, and he would often talk about it. He was always saying about how, well, when I was in the SAS or this or that, the other, pulls out the essay. No mention of the SAS, no mention of being a lieutenant, no mention of lots of the things that he's been talking about. So they contact the army about his army record. Turns out, no, he wasn't in the SDS. This is all lies. There's a lot of lies about Stefan Scott, and there's a lot more to come out. So Docker demands a meeting with him. He's mostly annoyed about the lack of productivity. That seems to be the underlying issue, is that he's, apart from saying, I want to know your address, I want to know your car registration so that they can be protected, which isn't coming through. He says, I want to report on the SWP involvement in the nurses dispute. And also something else, which he couldn't remember what the topic was. These don't get submitted.
And I think that's one of those nuances that comes out in this sort of stuff, is like, productivity was key. We see this when he was talking about Lambert yesterday. It's like, Lambert can do all these abuses, but the product was good as far as they were able to say, or it was lies, but they were able to present it as good. Yeah. As this, Stefan Scott, you say, his cardinal sin wasn't to be a Walter Mitty, as Barr puts it, but just not to produce the results.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the laziness that was what they were mostly concerned about. It seemed that later things would come out about fraud, but it didn't seem that bothered about that. The con man stuff only came up because they were bothered about the lack of productivity. He also talked about how, as an officer, he was trying to be the top dog in the unit. He talked about how he manipulated not just his targets, which was what he was expected to do, but he was also manipulating the officers around him. He talked about how Stefan Scott had kind of split the unit in half, really, with those who supported him and those who accepted that there was a problem with his role. And
it's interesting is like when you go back and look at the other documents, who the split is like people along HN4, HN8, but Dines and Lambert. It's, I'm going to put it politely, the lying bastards who all with their fellow lying mate, and it's supposed to be the other officers going, well, we're devious, but we can see that he's being devious. We're not stupid. I think the split was more probably, birds of a feather.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems very clear. So there's he's brought in for a meeting with Docker and HN109. It's put to him that he's not being productive, that his background details show that he's been lying about his previous experience, and there was going to be a recommendation given to senior officers that he withdraw from the unit. He'd have 12 days to withdraw from his place. Apparently he walked out, went to the toilet, came back, and then blamed HN109.
Yeah, but he walked out. We didn't hear much about this, but he has time to go and make a phone call now. This is not mobile phone day, so it's like, what? Sorry? You made a phone call and then you come back and start blaming the other officers.
Yeah. And, he blames the other officers. Oh, super. Well, that's great, isn't it?
You got what you wanted. You got what you wanted, is what I said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He blames HM109 for it entirely. Now, it's put to Docker, 12 days isn't long for an undercover officer to withdraw. Exfiltration generally would take place over a matter of months. Some people would lay the groundwork for exfiltration years in advance. We were given examples of HN33, HN88, how long it took for them to withdraw, and would plant the seeds, sending postcards from further away and all this kind of stuff. And it was put to Docker that the reason he did it in such a short period of time is that Docker was off to a training course. Yes. To which Docker went, I was going on training. I want it all sorted out before I went on the training course. As it turns out, that 12 days becomes much longer, and I think it's June.
So basically, Scott doesn't want to leave, so he's procrastinating like mad and refusing to do it. So he's part of the problem. And then there's a long bit. The question was surely by asking him to withdraw so short, you're putting him at risk. He's in the SWP. He's not at risk. There are other officers who've had to withdraw short notice from probably quite much more serious groups. So a lot of fuss has been made about you put undue pressure on him by making him withdraw so soon. And it's just like, no, he'd already known his star was fallen. He already knew his trouble. The fact was he couldn't actually deal with it. He was never a suitable choice for SDS in the first place. So there's all these questions going on. Was the management showing lack of care, which kind of skating over those other sides of the story around Scott. And to me, the issue isn't whether they showed care. They had a situation of an out-of-control officer, but why was he there in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And Docker's He's like he couldn't cope with being challenged on it. He was obviously he'd never had somebody challenge him on his bullshit, on his lies, on his con man act in the past, and they were just calling him out on it. There was no. He was perfectly capable, if he'd wanted to, of withdrawing with those 12 days. He didn't accept that at all. And then we get the insane situation, really, where he's found sleeping rough on a park bench in York Minster, around the cathedral. He's been taking a load of pills. Of some, it's not clear what those pills are, but he's taken some drugs. He's carrying in his pocket a load of SDS paperwork, including his AQR file, which is the appraisal of him, which says he's doing a shit job. He's found by the police. He's uncooperative, so they take him into custody. At which point, he tells them his real name. He tells them that he's a load of information about his deployment. They believe that it must be about a friend, because the name on the paperwork is different from his name, so it must be about somebody else. The SDS quickly send up a group of 3 officers, including the chief inspector, a female police officer, and John Dines, to go and bring him home, bring him back to London. He's actually based in Norwich, but for some reason, but bring him back to London. Docker's asked, did he have any? He said he never spoke to him again. He didn't have any dealings with him. Didn't get a debrief from him. Didn't get a debrief from Dines either. Wasn't interested. Didn't want to know. It's put. Might be a medical issue, and he.
It should be worded as like Docker's thing is that it went up the chain.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually very indicative of his evidence as a whole. It says, it's for them up there.
Yeah.
I am not interested in what the more senior managers. If I can shove it up, it's just like it seems to be his entire style of managing. Difficult issue. And I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to push it up there. It's somebody else's problem. Yeah. And it's like, at which point are you actually going to take some responsibility, man?
Yeah, I mean, he's very clear actually throughout, isn't it? Everything's either below his pay grade or above his pay grade. So it's like,
what is his actual responsibility?
I mean, it was even put to him, on times about, his actual responsibility was making sure that police officers weren't put in a position where they were, undercover officers put in a position where they would have to deal with certain problems. And when they are, he said, that wasn't my problem, and he just makes excuses for everything, But, it goes up the chain. There's a medical assessment of him. Docker's not buying any of it. Docker is like, it's all putting it on. He's pulling the wool over people's eyes. He doesn't buy it. There's nothing wrong with him. He doesn't believe in mental health generally, but he certainly doesn't believe it in the case of Stefan Scott. He claims that it's said that Scott breaks down crying in a meeting with another senior officer. This is characterised by Docker as crocodile tears. He doesn't believe it in the least.
No sympathy whatsoever, and it's one of those tricky ones because. He did have a mental. I do think reading the documents there was definitely a mental health breakdown, but that doesn't mean he's not being manipulative at the same time, and that that he's not also twisting the stories to face his own needs, just as Docker is twisting the things to meet his own needs. So I think there's a grain of truth in all of it, but Docker is just like he's a born liar, which is perfect for the SDS. This is what they are. They're born liars. And now they've come up against their own issues. Like, here are officers we've recruited to lie, now lying against us. How do we deal with it? We don't believe them. And that's that,
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it seems fairly clear that, that Stefan Scott did have a mental breakdown. I mean, all the details of it kind of make sense. But we mustn't forget, he's an evil shitbag who deserves everything he gets. So fuck him. But, there's a lot more kind of, looked into, is it going to be a medical discharge? Docker's against this, because if he has a medical discharge, he keeps his fucking pension and gets a 30%, which is fucking massive, a 30% enhancement on his pension because of the injury that has come from the deployment. So, basically Docker's well against this, but they can't discipline him because there's a fear if they discipline him, he blows up the whole operation.
And that is their number one terror in all of this. They don't really give a shit about his mental health. Every time they talk about welfare in all of this, there's a lot of welfare. So they have one concern: where are they going to do Scott? Where are they going to spill the beans to the world that the unit existed and what they're doing. That is their number one concern. Welfare is just simply code for that.
And we see that very clearly from minutes of a meeting with the security services, which is quite hyperbolic. It's full of hyperbole. It's full of hyperbole throughout. It's saying about it's going to go supernova. Evil tidings. Could this be the end of the SDS? And certainly, Docker's quite clear. Yeah, he thinks that there was a danger that it could have ended the SDS. He said that the Home Office wasn't told. But he said also, well, the Home Office didn't really know about the unit much anyway. I mean, we've heard a lot about these annual reports. And a lot of people seem to think these annual reports were sent to the Home Office. They weren't. They were given to a senior police officer to read and then to go and have a meeting with the Home Office where he would use the contents of the annual reports for the discussion. No minutes were kept to those meetings. So, the knowledge of the Home Office is clearly very limited, as is, obvious.
But deliberately so. It's like, it's London ruled. It's cover your ass. It's like, if I don't know, then I can't be held to account. It's like nobody. It's like this incredibly powerful intelligence apparatus has no accountability. You think it's clearly an MI5 and stuff. It's like, somebody please explain to me who was making actual decisions, who was doing it anywhere in this organization, because what we're seeing is just knocking the problem somewhere else, blaming somebody else, covering their ass, but nobody actually taking responsibility.
I mean, that includes, Eric Docker's solution is move him somewhere else in Special Branch. It's like, never mind the fact that he's disobedient, he's dishonest, he can't be trusted as far as you can throw him, but doesn't mind that, let's move him somewhere else in Special Branch. I think it's B Squad they talk about.
Yeah, and they basically stick him on the desk and doing Irish matters. It's just like...
Yeah, it's like literally, he can't be trusted to deal with the SWP, let's have him deal with the IRA.
It couldn't say better. Yeah, that is essentially what it amounts to. It's like... okay, wow. This comes from a time where cops didn't get sacked. And there's no question of him even leaving Special Branch. There's no question of him returning to uniform. He's going to stay in Special Branch. Nobody's like I think it's fair to say Docker is the most annoyed with him, the most wanting him to, and he's like, well, we'll put him somewhere else in Special Branch, which is kind of insane, right? Yeah. And when they could have put him somewhere else, like in port, somewhere out of the way, somewhere to think, but it's clearly like, no, they wanted him where they could see him, because if he was in B Squad, he was B where they could see him on a daily basis, like clock in, clock out now, and stuff. So it's about containment.
Yeah, absolutely, entirely. Docker's really unrepentant about the mental health stuff. He still doesn't buy it. He reckons there's nothing wrong with this guy. He was pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. He doesn't accept there was any medical issues whatsoever. And in the end, Scott generally gets away with the whole thing. There's no real comeback to him.
So Scott essentially gets away with this. He retires. He gets the pension. There'd be a sigh of relief. And that's
kind of it, right?
Yeah.
Then the thing is, though, is that there's a bigger issue here now, right? We've heard from the inquiry, at the end of the first tranche is like the unit should be wound up. Things are kind of worse now. It's not just Scott. There's Chitty. There's all these other things which, that they're worried about the end of the unit, that something's going to happen to blow it all up.
Yeah, and you really do get a sense that this is a existential crisis for the unit, bubbling away on the scenes, that they're really worried, they're talking about having to fold if stuff gets out. There's the meeting where they talk about where MI5 talk about the situation going supernova. There's lots of hyperbole, but generally, Mitting found it in the 1970s. If anybody had actually done a look into the unit, they would have gone, "Oh no, this shouldn't have existed. It should have been continued." This is much, much bigger. There's a much more existential threat going on, and it's a question: will he find the same again? Like, nothing really happened. There's a bit of like, we're skating on thin ice, make some changes, but the changes are half-arsed. They don't really address the deeper rot within the SDS. So they managed to get through this crisis, but it is a real crisis for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that crisis of, yes, we know our officers are deceiving people. Yes, no, they're lying everywhere. Couldn't ask them direct questions about sex or criminality because then they'd lie to me. But they're not being productive as well as lying. Fucking hell. Can't have that.
But this is by any means that anything goes. They're not actually interested in the officers. They're not interested in their welfare. as we said before, everything is about security of the unit and getting product out. It's actually quite a cold and heartless regime. It's like there's no real humanity towards their own officers, and that's the people they're close to. So you can see why there's no humanity towards what they refer as the wearies, everybody who's the target and has their lives destroyed by these assholes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more to come this afternoon. We've got the last bit of evidence from Eric Docker will be this afternoon. Expecting anything of interest?
Not really. I think we've gone through most of the main topics. There'll be some going back over questions, tightening up. We'll have be putting in Rule 10s questions. The way where we want to tighten up certain bits. But yeah, I don't think it'll be too late to finish.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for joining. We'll see you in this afternoon. Bye for now.